invaginate and actually kind of pull these things in. Makes a little a connection around it. And here we have a phagosome. So what this does, a lysosome, which is filled with chemicals, that's going to go break down the different chemical structures within the bacteria. It's going to join with this phagosome, and it's going to break it down, and then we're just going to eject soluble debris out the other side. So this takes something that could be potentially very harmful and turns it into something very harmless. So this is really what's going on in all of our immune cells, with the exception of some that are a little bit more specialized. So I wanted you to see the word, I wanted you to kind of understand what's going on there. Phagocytosis is not as bad as it sounds. It comes from the Greek, pretty much just means to eat. A cellular eating machine pretty much is what it is. So a lot of these phagocytes are white blood cells. This is one of the most important ones. It's called a natural killer cell. And what it does is it will destroy any cells that become cancerous or anything that becomes affected with a virus. And as I said, those things are really changes in our DNA. And so these natural killer cells are like, we're going to take care of these. We're going to just eat them up. It doesn't need any activation. It just says, if I see something that's not supposed to be there, I'm going to take care of it. So, very important cells to our immune system. These are all cells that have different, they have a big name, I'm not going to go over it. Neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. These are all very important cells in our immune system as well. This is like when you get a white blood cell count with differential, when they do blood work with you, this is what they're looking at, because this gives them a lot of information as to what type of infection you might be dealing with, if you're dealing with an infection at all. Or people who have different diseases of white blood cells, either too many or too little, they want to see how many total you have here. So we look at things like neutrophils. These are big phagocytes. They're the ones that are going to go and gobble up a lot of the cellular debris that develops. They're going to go after bacteria, cancerous cells, and dead particulate matter, and this is a little cellular picture of one of them, just so you can kind of have an idea of what these things look like. Eosinophils are going to respond more to parasitic infections. So if you have one of these big, long nematodes or worms living inside of you, it's going to go and it's going to do what it can to attack it and take care of it so that it gets passed harmlessly throughout your body. It also is going to clean up after your basophils. Your basophils are what is mediating your allergic reactions. So people who have problems with their basophils, or they just have sensitivities, it's the basophils that are secreting the histamine that's causing the allergic reactions. And I said here, it works with IgE, which is another part of your antibody system. And we have monocytes. Monocytes are what become macrophages. And you can see here from the root word, we have another phagocyte here. Tissue macrophages are the filters. This is when we look at the lymph nodes. They're just full of macrophages. And they're going to filter all the lymph that comes through, and they're going to recognize what cells belong and what cells don't belong. Then they're going to take the cells that don't belong and they're going to eat them up, and then they're going to actually trigger the immune system. We call these antigen-presenting cells. They're going to take the antigen that's foreign, that's not supposed to be there, and they're going to take it to other specialized cells and say, hey, this is here, and it doesn't need to be here. Learn how to fight this organism so that we never see it again. Okay? So it's going to process and present these antigens to lymphocytes, which we'll see here in just a second. Mast cells, again, part of the histamine, the allergic reactions. Essentially, once a basophil leaves circulation, once it leaves your blood vessel, it becomes a mast cell and does the exact same function. So lymphocytes. I said that the macrophages, they're going to come out and they're going to show the lymphocytes, hey, this is what I found, you need to take care of it. T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. We'll see B lymphocytes here in a second. These are going to confer what we call cell-mediated immunity. Remember when I showed you earlier, we have initial response and we have secondary response. This is the initial response, okay? So we have what we call T helper cells, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, T suppressor cells, cytotoxic T cells. These are really interesting because these are like your natural killer cells. They're going to take the foreign tissue, the cancers and the viruses, and they're just going to eat them up and they're going to destroy them. The only difference with these is they have to be shown by the macrophage, say, this is the antigen I want you to go destroy. Natural killer cells can do that without even being activated. So this is looking at B lymphocytes. This is our humoral immunity, or our antibody-related immunity. This is for our secondary exposures. So you can see the cell looks very similar to the T lymphocyte, but what I want you to see is these are antibodies here. This is what they're producing in response to antigens that it encounters. So you can see here these are different antigens, but only one of these antigens fits the binding site. Each antibody is unique to one specific antigen. So again, where the body is very specific, very intelligently created, in order to be able to say there's millions and millions of foreign antigens out there, and we have antibodies for almost each and every one of them, which is just phenomenal. So, like I said, that occurs a lot when we're growing and developing when we're younger. So, we'll talk about why it's important children be exposed to these things when they're younger as well. So, specialized chemical factors. This is a big word here, chemotaxis. We see the word taxi in here. What this really is talking about is it's the mechanism or the vehicle that draws white blood cells to the area where they need to be. And again, very intelligent design here, that the products of the cells going through and breaking down the infection or the area that is being affected is actually releasing chemicals that's drawing more cells to the area. So very interesting and very, very important that the body does this. It also allows them to communicate, releasing chemicals like interferons, interleukins, cytokines, and complement factors. These are all things that work together in order to give us a coordinated immune response. If we don't have these, or if we have too many, if we have too little, the body's not going to be able to adequately communicate what's going on and what needs to be brought in and what needs to be taken out. So these are all very important. This is looking a little bit more in depth at the T cells, because T cells are very, very important. Like I said, this is what is going to encounter the different organisms or whatever's coming into your body initially. This is a really interesting one, the T suppressor cell, because this cell will go and will shut off T helper cells, B cells, and macrophages. What can happen is if we don't have these guys can just run rampant, and they just kind of go crazy and they just start attacking everything. That's not a good thing. So that's why T suppressor cells are very important in immunoregulation. This is looking a little bit more at the cytotoxic, or the T cells. Like I was saying, kind of like the natural killer cells that just go and kill anything. This is how they work though. As you can see, they have to have an antigen that they recognize. They're going to attach to it, and then they're going to release different chemicals into it that are actually going to go and just kind of what we call perforins. It sounds like perforate. That's essentially what they do. They just go poke holes into this whatever's not supposed to be there, and so it starts messing with the environment, and it starts leaking fluid in, and it just explodes. So very nice way for the body to get rid of these things. This is looking at T helper cells. You hear a lot about T helper cells because they're very affected in HIV and development of AIDS. This is really what we lose when we have these types of conditions. So we have T helper cells that are essentially going to coordinate, they're helpers, they're going to coordinate everything going on in this immune reaction. So they're going to release lymphokines or cytokines that are going to be our chemical messengers, and they're going to start bringing the macrophages into the area in order to start cleaning up. These macrophages then of course are going to start tagging antigens and start displaying them so that more white blood cells can come in and take care of the problem. Then we're going to have like I said, they're going to come in here, they're just going to kind of explode. They're going to have lots and lots of replication. They're going to take care of the problem. Then we're also going to create memory cells so that in the future, when we're exposed to this again, we have a really quick T cell reaction as well. But then it's also going to affect B cells as well, so that B cells are going to start creating more antibodies. So very important cells in the immune system. And this is looking a little bit more at it. You can see the T helper cells activating B cells, creating antibodies, also creating the macrophages, and also the killer T cells. This one is the same one, just a little bit more in depth. And I'm not going to go over it very in-depthly, but I just want to show you. We have humoral immunity being created here. And you can see here Th2. We're going to talk about this in just a second. Th2, Th1. So this is humoral immunity, or antibodies. This is cellular-mediated immunity. And as I said, they're both very important. What happens though, like I said, Th1 is going to activate cell-mediated immunity, Th2, humoral. When we're This is where I'm going to talk a little bit about vaccines. Vaccines will come in and they'll activate Th2. They don't do a whole lot with Th1. When we take a vaccine, we just inject it into our body. It bypasses all the normal mechanisms that we would normally intake a pathogen or some foreign substance into our body. So it's not going to activate our SIG-A, our secretory IgA that is on all our mucous membranes. It's not going to activate the T cells as much because the T cells aren't having initial exposure. They're just being exposed to some antigen out there in free circulation. What you really get is you get a lot of B cells, B lymphocytes, creating antibodies. So when you're exposed to it again in the future, you will have an immune response to it. That immune response just isn't as coordinated. It's not as powerful. The big things with vaccines is that you will have some antibodies, some memory of them, and that's what they show in all the literature. Vaccines work. They work great. They will boost up your antibodies, but the thing is you don't have all the T cell reactions as strongly as you would if you didn't have that initial exposure through the bloodstream. If we get exposed to it the way we should have equal T cell and B cell. So it's very important that we have that. So that's really the only thing I'm going to say about that. We'll talk about it maybe a little bit more here in a bit, but that's why I say, get some education about it. Read through some of the resources that I have on one of the pages, and just kind of figure out for yourself. Maybe there are some that are good, maybe there's some that are bad. So I'm just going to leave you to think critically and kind of look through some of that information. Okay. So review and overview. We're just going to skip that for now. We're going to get into dysfunction of the immune system. What happens when something goes wrong in all this whole process? Well, what causes dysfunction in the first place? Well, the same thing that causes dysfunction in any part of our body. Stress. And we talk about that a lot in chiropractic. Sympathetic dominance, which is where we have one part of our nervous system is functioning too high, and another part of our nervous system is not functioning as well as it could. When we have this stress or sympathetic dominance, it really wears on our body, including our immune system. We'll see that here in a bit. Breakdown of barrier systems. So if we start having breakdowns of our blood-brain barrier, our gastrointestinal barrier, our respiratory barrier, we're going to start having things leak through that are going to cause dysfunction. Radiation and oxidative stress, free radical injuries, those all kind of go together. Everybody hears about free radicals and really what goes along with that. So those are all very important for creating things like cancer cells when we start having mutations of the DNA. We can have injuries. If we have an injury where bacteria can get into the body, it can definitely cause some dysfunction. Allergy and sensitivity. Also, again, very inflammatory and very related to immune dysfunction. Infections, bacterial, viral, parasitic, and fungal, again, will mess with the body's ability to create a mounted defense. However, the body should be able to take care of all these things. I guess I haven't really alluded to that yet, but the body should be able to take care of all these through the immune system. It's only when the immune system isn't working as optimum that we aren't able to deal with these. So, vitamin D deficiency and nutrient-poor processed food, also very detrimental to our immune system. So, all these things are some type of stress. A lot of people think of stress just being as that I have too much to do, I need to be here, I need to be there. Any of those things we saw on the previous page is this type of stress. And we can also, as those of you who are in chiropractic for a while know, we have physical, chemical, and emotional stresses. And these all can wreak havoc anywhere in our body. They all cause some sort of inflammatory reaction. And they can all have very different outcomes.